Hello and welcome everyone to the SPL waiting room. Today's going to be an interesting one for you. Got Finch and Dave on a little bit later. We're going to be talking about what they saw in week number 1. A couple of gods. We're going to go over some facts and look ahead towards this week, which is going to be a doozy. There's a matchup tomorrow. I think everybody at this point is excited for the Leviathans versus the Dragons. It's the one that we're all kind of clouding as the match of the week. I'm excited to see how that one's going to go, but we'll get into that one a little bit later. The biggest thing, and you can see it over there, is this topic that I wanted to cover, which is specifically the King of the Pro League, and that's not necessarily player-based. That was Agro's opinions from last week. Mine is actually about the King of the Jungle, who has made himself the #1 priority, it seems, in the SPL. And I'm talking, of course, about ANHUR here. Now, he has been played in 17 games. He is the most picked god so far here in Season 8. And he's been doing pretty well. I mean, a 53% win rate, right? So technically, he's above average. But that's the interesting thing, is he's getting so highly prioritized. He's making some sick plays. He's been first pick twice. He's been in the top 3 for one of the two teams, I guess the top 6, 15 total times. And he's only been picked up in the bottom 2s, I believe, twice down there. So he is a very high priority god. He is someone that everybody is focused on, and he's making a lot of plays. Now, the question is, will the nerfs that happened on Tuesday affect this at all? For those who don't know, his Impale, the power scaling, was decreased by about 5%, so it's only going to be 75% now. And his Desert Fury got a couple of damage per hit knocked off. So 170 at max, now 165 at max. Is that going to affect him at this level? I'm going to go ahead and say no. I think for a fact these pros are still going to be locking him in, but my eyes are going to be on whether or not he escalates to a #1 priority pick, where we actually have been seeing things like Ymir, Sobek, the Tiamat really fighting for it. So keep your eyes on her this weekend. He is where I'm going to be looking. But before we get into week 2 and go too deep off that end, we do want to look a little bit back at week number 1. So of course I'm going to bring in some experts with me. We've got Finch and Dave. They did the whole recap last year, and so this time we're going to ask you guys more about this year and going forward. Well, not this year, not going forward. What happened last week? How about that one? And your thoughts specifically on week number 1. So Dave, we'll jump over to you first. What stood out to you in week 1?
Solo laners, I think, is really what surprised me here in this past week. Julio and Haddix were the two standouts in my mind from this week. The Bolts went 1-0 in their matchups this week, and then the Leviathans went 2-0 in their matchups. I think in large part thanks to the aggressive play style that we're seeing these SPL newcomers bring to the table. We'll start off with some Haddix highlights. That'll roll on into some Julio highlights. Haddix in his one set, we only got to see one set from Haddix this week, played King Arthur in both games. You know what this guy did? 10-2 and 15 was his KDA across 2 games. And I just think it's so wild. You get a pick like this. This highlight specifically, him and Jake tower diving a tier 2 tower while tier 1 is still up, and then picking up a double kill on the end of it. This is all pretty indicative in my mind of 2 players who love to be aggressive, that are synergizing well with one another, and have the ability to take the game over. We're seeing this out of the solo lane in general, but I think Haddix and Awesome Jake for this Bolts team really took the set over against the Valkyries to the edge, and the Valkyries just didn't have the chance to turn things around. Now on the other side, Julio, much the same. Similar god pool. We saw 2 sets out of the Leviathans this week. Tyr, Sun Wukong, Cucullin, King Arthur, all for Julio. You know what he did? 13-3 and 24. These are 2 newcomers I'm talking about to the SPL. Extensive competitive experience, but the ability to join their respective teams and play these types of picks, you know, you're not relegating yourself to just chilling in the front line and trying to initiate the entire time, hoping that the rest of your team is there to just do some damage. They are playing picks that want to get in your face, they want to do damage, and they also want to set up for the rest of your team. And I think that's wild to already see that level of confidence from those 2 guys. So my kind of recap on this previous week in the SPL was, of course, that the Bolts and the Leviathans won their respective games, but I was just surprised at how good these newcomers to the solo lane and to the SPL are already looking.
Yeah, Haddix we're going to get to take a peek at later when the Bolts play, but tomorrow Julio's got, like, the matchup, right? He's going up against Finoke. Like, that one is going to be interesting to see how he handles it. Granted, I will throw this out there now. We'll have to deal with a splice of ping, so we'll see how that handles the Dragons very well. Finch, what about for you, though? What stood out to you in week number 1?
To me, man, I think that it's got to be these Oni Warriors now. They've got a chance now to start getting a little bit of momentum going. I know they lost their very first set of the week, but then they played up against, I think it was the Scarabs, and they were able to get themselves a win. Might have been the Bolts, actually. Excuse me there, guys. But the Warriors were able to get that win up against the Scarabs, and I think the reason why is that they're finally starting to click the way that we thought they would. In particular, Nika had a monster performance. Actually find it something borderlining a federal offense that you talked about solo laners, how good they looked, and didn't talk about my man Nika. This dude was an absolute monster, and he had to rotate out of solo lane early. Look at the timer on this clock. That is not a mistake. My man was literally forced by the pace of the game to come out here and do exactly what he did, nothing less, and that's what he was able to accomplish. It was absolutely necessary. It was not just him, though. Dardes ended up having another monster performance, just the kind of thing that we know and we should be expecting from him going forward. The entire team stepped up. I think it was initially individual effort from Nika that kind of set up for this whole thing to happen, that gave them the ability to even get back into the game and for Dardes to start doing things like what he's about to do here with his transformations. But before all of that, it was Nika and his monster performance. I know the Warriors have not looked great to start off this year. That is an objective and correct fact to say. But right now, it just looks to me like up against a team that's been playing well this year, they were able to find their momentum finally with a convincing 2-0. They're going to have a really big test coming up here this week to see if they actually can keep that momentum going. They just played the Scarabs. Now they're going to be going up against the Bolts, I believe, here today. But I think that they have a shot. They need, though, for Dardes and Nika to keep playing the way that they have been playing, and then to get Cuvo Fred a little bit more involved. This team has looked a bit lost at times. Looked like they weren't quite sure where their momentum was going to come from. If it has to be Nika, then I say let it be Nika until this team is back at 100% so they can start chaining some wins together. But I think there's a real chance that this team has finally found some momentum and can start to get it started.
Yeah, I'm excited to see them and what they're able to do. Like you had mentioned, they're going to be playing the Bolts later today, and then they end up having a doubleheader. The Leviathans, not necessarily an easy matchup for them there, I believe, on Sunday for them. I looked at it, at least in game, right now the Warriors were voted for a little bit more, so we'll have to see if they're able to
not hold the Leviathans.
That crown, especially, over the Leviathans.
Well, he's up there.
I did look at these a few days ago, so maybe something has changed since then. It'll be interesting to watch specifically because of that. In fact, we can look at some of the stats from last week, thanks to Blues Ultra. Great graphics that comes out of this guy. I love looking at him, and that is a quick way to I guess encapsulate, first off, the standings, but also how last week went. And I think the biggest factor is the Valkyries got that 2 over the Warriors, but the Warriors looked much better, and a lot of the sets you had just highlighted, Finch, there, and the Scarabs showcases the shortest game as well, which I believe last week we technically hit a new quote-unquote record. It went to 25 minutes and like 9 seconds. So interesting things all in that. But this is the problem. Look at the top KDAs. There's nothing but dragons up there. That is a scary thing to think about. And when you look at the control that a lot of these teams have had, First Blood rate is interesting, but Pyromancer, Fire Giant control rate, when you have teams that are at 100%, that's scary to me, Dave. And I don't know about you, but I'm really worried about some of these teams.
Agreed. Look, I am very surprised, actually, at how good the Valkyries have looked, and a lot of the control rates that you saw down there towards the bottom, specifically First Blood. Valkyries are the second highest team in the league right now at controlling the First Blood here in these games. That they have started off pretty well, I think, given all expectations, some players playing from overseas. So if we continue to see that trend, First Blood control rate out of the Valkyries, and then kind of mesh the rest of their game together, it could be a dark horse team to take some wins off the top teams.
It's going to be exciting to see how this all shakes out, but of course we have to get towards what we expect to see and things like that. And I wanted to look at some of the gods that have been kind of power dynamics, I would argue, here in the SBL, specifically what has been going on, some of the top picks, and in this case, the #1 first pick, tied with Sobek, and that is Ymir. And I wanted to ask you guys, and Finch, we'll start with you, what do you think about this Ymir? He's not really getting banned that often. We don't see him. If you look at the SCC, he's not getting picked up too often. But he's been first picked 5 times overall, and he seems to be doing pretty well to me. What is it about him, and what is the play style that people are bringing with him?
Listen, I know that our instinct is to say Amir has early kill potential, right, in lane. I know that our temptation to say that the freeze is one of the most easily applied CCs in the game, and it's pretty darn good, but I think that we are all discounting the best thing that he has, and it's the wall. Guys, it's too good in these late-game team fights in the jungles, and the best players at it, who I think are particularly obviously wrong you in PBM, but I think maybe even a little better might be Jake, are able to do it. That's why this pick's not permabanned like Athena, right? Athena, doesn't matter whose hand that pick falls into, it doesn't matter what the comp is around her, she's going to elevate your team to give you a really, really good chance to win. I don't think that Mir is one size fits all, and pretty worked out that Jake is the one that comes up here next and finds some pretty nuts freezes, because this is exactly my point. It's the players that end up playing it that I think that elevate this pick, since the compositions that they're on that elevate them as well. You need a composition that can work alongside this Amir pick, that can, yes, leverage that early pressure into value, but that can also really benefit from these walls. You need another composition that can't just jump over them and get out of there right away. I think you got to make sure you're picking up around the right spot, and when you do, he feels unbeatable.
And again, I guess the question that you see at the bottom, right? Who has the best Ymir in the SPL? I'm not gonna put my name on anybody here. I think it just varies game to game. I will say though, shout outs to Genetics for the Boots 2 start. Dave, you got someone in mind?
Oh, man, I'm thinking on a number of data points we've seen. It's easy to say PBM, and I think Finch is really good for bringing that up. I'll be succinct here. I think Jake is throwing his name into that conversation. I'm not going to put my stamp on it, but I think his name should be at the forefront of that conversation.
I mean, I'm going to also give shout-outs to Neil. So Genetics had the Boots 2 start, was a lot more aggressive last week, and I want to say Neil only because the wall that stood out into my mind was the one where he blocked off the Phoenix to make sure that it could last a little bit longer. Just little plays like that. I love Ymir, and I'm sure somewhere out there Kelly Link is seeing that Ymir is a top pick in the SBL, and she's also having the time of her life because that's how I learned my Ymir, so I imagine it's great. Dave, you've been talking a lot about solo lane today, though, and so naturally
and leaving out
Nika,
Nika,
come to you to talk about, leaving out Nika.
It's the newcomers. Come on,
Nika was playing an assassin. We're going to talk about a warrior. So you look at it on her. I had mentioned earlier, he's king of the Pro League. He's the #1 pick right now in the SBL. There's another guy with a crown just behind him, King Arthur at 13. But tied with King Arthur is Sun Wukong. Now, Sun Wukong we've seen banned a little bit more often. We've seen picked up a little more often, or I guess at the same amount as King Arthur. Well, what is it about Wukong that is making him such a mainstay?
Well, I'm not going to give all of the credit over to Bluestone, but I think first and foremost, if you walk into laning phase, Sun Wukong is a pick that synergizes very well with Bluestone as a starter item, and it synergizes very well with Bluestone Brooch later on in the game, if that's what you want to go towards, which is, I'd argue, near 100% of the time. We're in an area now where the Sun Wukong pick is safe, and that was kind of the sort of joke we kept throwing out at Sun Wukong's expense later on last year in Season 7 is, he's really good at running away and sustaining. And now we're really starting to see, and we saw this towards the end of Season 7, he is great at that. Also fantastic at doing immense amounts of damage. I mean, how many times have we seen Sun Wukong's end at the top of the damage charts near the mid to late in these games? The control that they're able to bring, not only in the lane, but to the team fights, while allowing themselves to sustain and allowing themselves to do damage. I mean, I've seen Sun Wukong's delete backliners sometimes in these fights. It's just so difficult to play against. And I think so much of that caters into why we're starting to see this pick on the rise. Somewhat safe in lane as well. If you're not as confident in your solo laner's matchup, you're able to stay back, you can farm, you can run away with the transformations if you want. You have the somersault cloud to sustain up in lane. So I think it's kind of a do-it-all type pick where if you're confident in your solo laner's ability to get aggressive, jump in the backline, and find damage, Sun Wukong can do that for you. If you need them to play a little safer in lane and you need them to just survive the laning phase, Sun Wukong can do that for you. He's kind of a jack of all trades at the moment. Not surprised to see him towards the top of the pick rates.
And another challenging question that comes through, who has the best Sun Wukong in the SBL? I'm going to be honest, I actually, the last one I was just kind of copping out. I think we have a lot of great Ymirs. I genuinely can't think of one Wukong player in my mind that stands heads and tails above everybody else. Finch, do you have anybody? I genuinely can't think of who I would give this crown to.
It's tough to say, right? I think I'm alongside you and think that this is just a strong pick overall,
Yeah,
more so
correct.
than any particular player
Yeah.
really elevates this one. More so, I would say. I mean, to kind of piggyback off Dave's point, I think he used to be a jack of all trades, but he's become a master of a couple things now with that bluestone to help him out. It's too much damage and too much survivability paired up. Maybe gun to my head, just because I think this guy's so good, I might say variety. You could put him on just about anything, but it's pretty hard to say anyone is better at this Wukong than really anyone else because it's such a good pick.
We kind of just have a lot of really good solo laners, don't we? Like, I'm trying to think
Yes.
of who who
And
I
it's
wouldn't give it to, and I genuinely can't come up with a name. Like, it's just they're all really nuts. It'll be fun to watch as it comes through. Because I anticipate we're going to see him a few times this week as well. Alongside him, somebody who's been on the rise. We tried to talk a little bit about him last week, and we're going to dive a little more in depth. Finch, I'll jump to you first. JANUS, who has been just making plays overall. I was looking at it, I think he's in the 60% for his win rate right now, but that's beside the point. I mean, he has been a mainstay, and granted, the first week it made sense because the Dragons played a couple of times, but he's been sticking around. A lot of players are picking him up right now.
Yeah, Giannis is, I think, strong independently, but I don't think he's so strong that you have to permaban him in every game. I think this is a great example of a pick that is good in certain comps, but when is elevated when he's placed into certain hands. And I don't know why I am pretending who I mean by those certain hands. I mean HURRIWIND. But I think this is a great clip to start off with, though, because Zero's pretty good at getting max value out of this Giannis as well. Listen, this god is unique, and what he does is hard to deal with in terms of his ability to move around the map, to bring the team with him, and to still provide consistent damage. I don't know if I'm on board with Giannis doesn't provide consistent damage. Unstable Vortex hurts, and it's up all the time, and it's nigh unmissable as well. Maybe he doesn't have direct bursts like maybe all these Scyllas do, where instantly one person is deleted, but in terms of his utility and still having decent damage, I think Giannis is just a really strong god right now that gets even more elevated in the hands of HURRIWIND and Zeros in particular at this point right now.
And I mean, you have to look at it. Veronica, again, another player that I think I was going to bring up anyway, but here's a good highlight for him that has been playing it. Dave, I mean, with what, I guess that's 3, maybe 4 mid laners that have been flexing around to him. Do you think he deserves, I guess, like the prestige that's around him? Like, is he someone you have to ban against certain teams, or is he someone that is just going to kind of have to exist as a thorn in everyone's side?
I think this is actually a pretty extensive debate, and I saw it on Reddit after one of the matches that HURRIWIND just kind of decimated their opposing team. And it's like, at what point do you bother banning it? Do you want more experience playing against it? I'd argue that experience should come in scrims, and then that's where you try to get the losses out of the way and try to figure out how to play against these picks. But eventually you just have to accept that it's a Giannis that's taking a seat to some of these other power bans. So I think against the right players, I think HURRIWIND deserves a Giannis ban at this point, if I'm being honest. Just see what, I mean, we know he can play other picks. We know he can. He's good at the game. He's good at mid. He's one of the best in the world. We know he can play other picks, but see what else he can play at that high of a level. I think he is worthy of a ban against a few of the mid laners here in the SPL.
I mean, it's almost the same conversation we were having about Nika's
there you go.
Amaterasu last year, right? Like, last year we were talking about it, and there was a certain point we just straight up asked Nika, like, how, like, do you even enjoy her? And he's like, I don't like playing Amaterasu, but I'm good at her, and we're winning with her. So if it's open, I'm going to lock her in. I feel like that's where HURRIWIND's Giannis has become, right? Where it is one of those, he might not even enjoy it. I have a feeling he probably does enjoy it, at least a little bit, somewhere deep in his soul. But no matter what, he's going to lock it in if it's available, because he's good at it and they're winning with it, and there's no reason not to unless something better comes along the way. But we can move forward now to the Fact Seat Gaming. Ooh. I'm going to throw a couple of things out there because I just looked this up. Kukulkan, Nemesis, Serket, Set, and Sobek all have a 70 up to 83% win rate, so those are 5 gods to keep your eyes out on for. But the ones that we actually prepared for this week, the ones that I prepared myself, are some questions. We'll start with a softball here, number 1.
Oh, God, I'm going to miss it.
Is
That's
the
scary,
most
huh? Yeah.
banned god right now in the SPL?
Oh, it's Athena. Well, there you go.
Athena, yep.
Yeah, okay, yeah, there you go. Nice and easy. See?
It was an actual softball. You meant it. Thank God.
Yes. So 92% ban rate. I think she's only made it through 2 games now. I think I think there was twice that she was allowed through, and I believe she has won every single game that she has played. So not surprising that she is going to be picked up.
Pretty good.
Go over. I had actually kind of said this earlier. Well, I guess see how well you were listening. Which gods took over as the most first picked? Guan Yu was the most picked in week number 1, but there are 2 gods tied for first pick now.
I think you said
ANHUR
was
one of them.
Oh, it's on her. You're right.
Is it Ymir and ANHUR?
Wow, when it's first pick, that's where the big breakup comes through. Ymir's right, but it's a Guardian counterpart that he has. It's Sobek that's hanging out up there.
Yeah, sit down, Dave. I said Ymir.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dab.
This is this is where things get really, really weird. So they've both been first picked 5 times. They've both won in first pick 3 times. It is very, very weird, except for the fact that then I'll throw out that Sobek, he's been allowed 7 games, so 5 of those 7 he's been the first pick, and he's won all 7 of those games. So he's won 7 of his 10 games. That's what I should say. And so he's been doing pretty well. 70% win rate there on Sobek. Nice to see. Now we're going to move into some questions, a little bit more about the players. Of course, I think these are going to maybe lend to each other's. I think Finch and I were talking about it earlier in the SEC.
Oh, great.
Who has the least deaths in the league?
Oh, the least
It's definitely
deaths.
someone on the Dragons. I'm going to push out maybe HURRIWINDS because he's always on JANUS and it's so safe.
You would be exactly
right.
right on that one. Yeah, HURRIWINDS has 2 deaths in the league. He is the lowest one of all of that, and it is exactly what you said. He's playing JANUS all the time, and it's very difficult to lock him down, so it's been working out well for him. And I guess kind of compounding with that, he has low deaths. Who do you think has the highest KDA in the league?
Oh, man. Sanford Soccer. I don't know.
Here's the thing,
Somebody
man.
on
I'm
the
just going to put
Dragons,
HURRIWINDS down for all answers. Am I allowed to do that?
You are allowed to do that,
competition.
and you would be right to do that. It was Sam, I believe, last week, but HURRIWINDS, because his deaths are so ridiculously low, has a 27.5 KDA right now.
That's
and
pretty good.
I can't remember. I have it right next to me. Like some of the next ones, like everybody else in the league, like 10.4 is the next highest on a different team. And that's Julio.
Right, that's not the Dragons.
So a very, very interesting one to see. And we've got a bonus now. This is the one that's fun because I don't know the answer to it, at least not off the top of my head. Which non-support player, I got to pull up my window, has the highest amount of assists? Dave, I'll let you go.
Sanford Soccer.
Close. I
Sanford
think it's
Soccer.
fine, okay. But I think you're close.
I'm going to throw out Julio. I'm going to say Julio just because I see his
Ooh.
KDA is really high. But
Panatom.
61 assists, third
I should have
place,
known.
right
They're the
behind
team of
Wrong
assists.
U and PBM.
That's why I always team fight.
Really solid. I was trying to talk about Panatom because I expect, especially with that many assists, maybe we'll start seeing his Thor come out pretty soon here. Who knows? I like the way the Leviathans have been playing. That's a nice little surprise for me. He was not on my list of people to guess for that one. So a fun one on top of that. But now we can start looking forward. That's all the facts. That's everything that we've looked at for the first 2 weeks. Now we can look at week number 3, and specifically the standings. You can see 2 teams tied up for 3-0.
They're pretty
Your
good.
first place teams
What's up,
playing tomorrow as well. The Dragons versus the Leviathans is tomorrow at 1 p.m. Make sure you tune in for that. But the Bolts are going to be playing today, 2-1. Yeah, kind of surprising. I think nobody really was going to give them credit. Granted, it's 2-1 versus the crowd of 1s and 2s. But very interesting to see if they can maintain this spot as number 3.
And their 2 wins are over. And you know, I don't want to throw an asterisk on it because all the teams have played well up to this point. Only the Titans without a win. The 2 wins that the Bolts have are against bottom half teams in the Valhalla Valkyries and the Solar Scarabs. So now I think the real stretch begins for this Bolts team to see how good they are.
Yeah, the Bolts will play later against the Warriors. That, honestly, is a toss-up. I'll be honest, that's a coin flip to me.
Set.
I don't know what's going to happen, and that might be one that's going to be exciting. But before we get to there, the Kings will be playing the Valkyries. That's today. Again, Leviathans, Dragons tomorrow. That's the match of the week because of how much weight it has. I would also argue the Titans versus the Scarabs, right? The Titans trying to get out of a rut. They're 0-3, and that might be their best bet to try and climb out of that rut. I don't know if the Scarabs are going to make it easy on them, though. But Finch, I'll jump to you real fast. Leviathans, Dragons, that's going to be a pretty big one. How are you feeling? Are you leaning one way or the other? Or just what are your thoughts on it?
Listen, I know the Leviathans have been nuts this week, and I came up on this exact show and defended them after their great week. But I just don't see how you bet against the Dragons right now. Apparently, the only time in the world you can bet against the Dragons is World's Finals, and even then, they're going to take it to 5 games, and it's going to be a nail-biter, right? So you just never... I don't think you're going to make money betting against the Dragons. As much as I like this Leviathans team, and I like how they're happy to be villains, I got to vote for the Dragons here.
Dave, what about you? Like, if you had to choose a player in this set, there's 10 of them to choose from. It's very difficult, but is there someone that you're keeping your eyes on a little bit more as kind of like a linchpin for the win?
Oh man, I'm going to look at a role specifically. I think Sanford Soccer on one side, Panatom on the other side. The mid lane matchup can't be ignored. That's kind of my next thing. If we're really going to dive deep into this matchup, these teams have played very similar schedules so far. Both have played the Titans and the Kings, and then the Dragons have played Warriors. Leviathans have played the Bolts. And so you have kind of a similar resume to compare against. Sanford Soccer 34, 15, and 49. In his 3 sets so far. Panatom 13, 12, and 61. So the kills and deaths a little bit worse for Panatom, but the assists, a multi-factor higher. So I think depending on which type of play style is going to end up winning the day between Sam, Panatom, get in your face, assassinate you versus set up for the rest of your team, I think those are kind of the linchpins. Whichever game plan works against one or the other on the day, I think is where my mind goes in this matchup.
Well, I know this week has a lot of actually highly contended matches that we're really anxious to see. Of course, we have to see how we all bet for them. And the one I'm most interested in is that Dragons column. Everybody betting
Who's
on
with me?
that one.
Let's go,
the Warriors
Finch!
and the Bolts.
Yeah.
So this is really interesting. I was looking at it. The Rundown guys were also very split on that one. I'm the only one going with the Bolts. I will be honest. I expect that to be the wrong of all of them.
They've got a
Like,
shot. It's close.
It is
They do.
definitely
They
a
do.
50-50 in my mind. The thing that catches me the most off guard on all of this, outside of maybe some of the
Let's
bottoms,
go, Finch!
don't look at these numbers. Don't look at these numbers. Say, hold
Yeah,
on, hold on,
baby!
hold on, hold on, hold on.
75.
Whoa!
Look at
Did
that.
I win
read the
last year
tier
too? I'm
ones.
just feeling crisp lately.
All your play-by-play guys way higher up than the analysts for some reason. I don't know how that
go.
one goes. But I was actually
smarter,
intrigued
too.
that we're all kind of split on the Titans and Scarabs matchup. I kind of
Right.
want to get your feeling. Like, Finch, do you think that one's as much of a toss-up as it seems?
I actually think that even though the Scarabs haven't been looking too great lately, you kind of got to have them favored until the Titans can show us that they can get things together. They have not looked great. I got to give it to the Scarabs, I think.
Yep.
Dave, you gave the thumbs up. Seems like you
Copy
agree
and
on that
paste.
one as well. So I'm excited to see what that one has. Of course, I mean, what's the point if we don't get to the actual game? So we're going to go to a quick break. We'll be back with the SMITEPro League in just a bit.